Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Bike Ped Task Force meeting. My name is James Hannig. I'm the staff assistant for the Department of Public Works. Just want to note a couple of administrative items here. Closed captioning is available on the desktop versions of Microsoft Teams. To enable that, click the three dots at the top of the window and click Turn on Live Captions. Unfortunately, captioning isn't always available for the web browser version of Teams. We also have American Sign Language interpretation. If you'd like to use that, please pin Jill or Derek by clicking on the three dots next to their names and click pin. We are also recording the meeting, just so that you're aware. And we just ask that participants please remain muted for the most part of the meeting while other members are speaking. If you'd like to participate, just raise your hand using the raise hand function or type your question or comment into the chat, and I'll be monitoring that throughout the meeting. So with that, I will drop the agenda and some notes and start with roll call here. So when I read the members' names, if you'll just let me know if you're present. Caressa Givens.
Present.
All right. Kevin Kushel.
Present.
All right. Mitch Henke.
Present.
All right. Montavious Jones.
Here.
All right. Of course, I switch windows. Claude Kroschek is excused. Nicholas Lajoie. Absent. Dan Rufus. Absent. Cynthia Taez.
Present.
All right. And Andy Tillman. Absent, but you do have quorum. I'll hand it over to you, Caressa.
Excellent. Just going to quickly get an approval of the minutes from last meeting in November. Just need a second. Anyone can second that.
I second.
Did I hear your cat second first?
Yes, you did.
Excellent, Montavious. Okay, wonderful. So actually, before we get into our meeting, I just want to quickly say I echo Montavious's comment in the chat because James Hannig here, staff assistant and who works in multimodal unit, will be leaving us, I believe, tomorrow. Is that correct, James? And we don't want to see you leave, but we know that you have a really exciting venture on the horizon in another community, which is in Detroit, who also needs a lot of help in making streets safer for people who walk and the pedestrian experience in cycling. I just want to say personally, I'll speak personally, that I really appreciate working with you, because I think we've had an opportunity to connect with people where they are in making street projects happen, which is very refreshing. And I hope that that type of work continues at the Department of Public Works. You've been very instrumental in working on that level of community engagement, and I've seen it in live action. And I'm just really appreciative of that. And I am really sad to see you go. And I appreciate you stewarding and helping me through this process as the chair, and also just being a great friend and colleague throughout the years. So I'm going to miss you a lot. And just thank you for everything that you've done. So, yeah, I think Mike wanted to say something about you too. So, Mike, what have you got to say?
Well, I'll start with the bad news. The bad, well, it's none of it's really great news, but the real bad news is I will be taking on the staff assistant role here for a while, which I'll do my best. But I'm excited to be working with you all. I know most on the call. I know obviously everyone on the task force here, and yeah, James has been for those who don't know me, Mike Amston, multimodal transportation manager at DPW, and James has been a tremendous asset to the city. Both internally as a colleague, but externally as a friend, but really somebody who cares about the city of Milwaukee and the people of Milwaukee and every neighborhood in Milwaukee, probably more than almost anybody I know. Which, I mean that. And James has been instrumental in the work that we in the multimodal unit have done over the past several years. But really throughout the city. I mean, James was responsible for passing the complete streets policy, for drafting and passing the pedestrian plan, for drafting and passing the safe routes to school policy plan. So his fingerprints, like it or not, are going to be all over everything we do going forward. So thank you, James. You're going to be missed. There's a lot of things I'm excited to take on that you've been doing or hand off. This is probably not one of them, but I will do my best to keep this ship afloat. So I'm looking forward to working with y'all.
Well, thanks everyone.
Nice.
It's been a delight and a pleasure, and you are in good hands as much as Mike may attest.
I'd like to second everything that's been said. And I think in talking to community leaders and stuff, the amount of trust that you've built within people outside of the city that are working to make the city better, I think that's a testament to your skill and your devotion to the work that you're doing. And it's going to be sorely, sorely missed. You understand that in order to do anything in the city, we must build trust within the communities. And I hope that can be echoed throughout the rest of the departments in the city as well. So thank you for everything you've done, James. You are an amazing, amazing person. I'm sad to see you go, but I'm also excited to see what you're going to be doing off in Detroit.
Awesome. Thank you. So James is actually not leaving after that nice round of sentiment. He's not leaving. He's actually staying. Yes, thanks, James, so much. We're gonna miss you.
I make a motion to declare December 1st, 2021, by the power of the chair of the Bike Pedestrian Task Force, declare this day James Hennig Day. All City, Milwaukee. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
You don't need any more days named after white dudes, but I appreciate it.
James is like shriveling right now. He's like, please don't. That's too bad. At least we'll party hard at Bike Pedestrian Task Force for you. Okay, well, let's get into it. Let's try to, make it worthwhile for Mike here. Put, brighten the horizons. And hopefully he'll want to be with us at some point. Okay, so first off, we are doing an election, and James has been so kind to put together a nice Mentimeter, and you can vote for chair. James, I don't know if you have anything else to say about that, but
I'll leave it.
I don't really want to say a lot.
I'll leave it to you, but I think it makes probably more sense for you to go through 2021 progress and accomplishments, because then
sure.
After the officer elections, technically it would get handed off to any new officers, and then they can kind of go through. Okay.
Okay, so I actually just created a little tiny PDF for you all, and I'll screen share if I can. There. Let's see, let me know when you can see my screen.
We can see it. We see ourselves.
Great.
Okay.
Can you see this now?
Yep.
Okay, so obviously I think we're always due for more progress, but I just wanted to quickly run down some things for you. We started a revisioning process of how this group functions this year, including working with Kevin to go through a mission, vision, providing an opportunity to share our goals and interests. And we actually did that through a Jamboard exercise, and a welcome to the public to participate as well. And actually, I have created a folder of all of those activities, including letters that have been submitted to the Bike Pedestrian Task Force that I will share with all of you in just a moment when I finish this. And I will say anything that anyone has, including like Kevin, I know Kevin's going to help me out today with some documentation, that you drop all that information in that it's like a Google Drive folder that's accessible to the public so they can see all these things. We formed 2 work groups based on the revisioning process, so things that rose to the top of interest of the member body. We have a projects and policy work group and a membership and bylaws work group, and that's headed by Kevin and Cynthia. Originally it was headed by Nicholas, the project and policies work group. And we're working on revising enabling legislation. The enabling legislation has been written, and it's set to go out to sponsors, plural, before the end of 2021. And Kevin is you're more than welcome to expand on that. But the last time Kevin and I talked, I think we agreed that we're just going to move it into sponsorships lapse instead of get caught in the weeds too much with Kathy. As we know, Kathy is very busy. City budget and ARPA funding. You may not recall this, but actually we submitted a couple of letters to support the ARPA process in garnering more funding for safer streets, particularly pedestrian and bicycle amenities, and even supporting transit. Also, Montavious and Mitch put together a nice succinct letter asking that our capital budget for multimodal increase from, I think it was $1.2 million to $2 million. That actually amendment was submitted by Alderman Kovac. However, it didn't go through, but I think it's just a good exercise for this group to, be actively asking for that funding. I believe many of us are hopeful for the total amount of funding that will come through, combined with the capital budget and ARPA funding. And I think it's good that we didn't lose any funding from the capital budget through this process. And the last thing I do have here is process. We have a new project and policy group leader, like I mentioned, Cynthia. And Cynthia is taking on responsibilities regarding building positive relationships with DPW. And we're going to learn more about that later with our time today. And coming up with a process for advising on major projects with the goal to help better inform the public about critical street projects that must improve pedestrian and cycling safety and access in the public right of way. So those are the things that I came up with. If anyone else has anything else they'd like to add, please feel free. But yes, that is what I have for you today in terms of progress. Have I stopped screen sharing?
Yes.
Okay.
Kevin has his
All
hand
right.
raised.
Okay, go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you. I did want to mention that the strategy for the legislation right now has been laid out. Our idea is that we will meet individually with alders who we believe could be potential sponsors for the legislation, talk them through the legislation itself, address any of their concerns, and hopefully convince them that this is something that should be done for the city of Milwaukee. So if you'll recall, the idea is that we will be creating a bicycle and pedestrian advocacy committee, which would have different responsibilities and enhance our impact a little bit more. And that would go hand in hand with the relationship building that Cynthia will be doing with DPW, but also with the Common Council. So that's our goal right now. We will be sending this out to sponsors before the end of the year, and I am more than happy to help out if I am no longer an officer or in charge of any of the work groups. So that was, excuse me, that was just a brief update on that.
Cool. Thanks, Kevin. Does anyone else have anything else to add before we move on to the next item?
I have a question for Kevin. Do we have any of those meetings set up with the alders, or is that still in the work identifying who they would be?
Yeah, we do not have any of the meetings set up yet. And I would be more than willing to listen to anyone who is interested in who we should approach first.
Okay, so what's going to be like the process of deciding who those alders will be and when do we think that would happen? Because, it's already the first and, holiday season coming up. If we want to get on the schedule before, people start taking off, like really it's be making some decisions pretty soon, I think.
Yeah, so we'll go with people with alders that we know have been sympathetic towards bicycle and pedestrian concerns initially. So a few alders come to mind immediately, such as
Sure.
Alderman Kovac, who has been a supporter in the past. So those meetings have not been set up yet, but we do have the legislation already written. That's the biggest part. I believe the emails will be coming out to try to schedule something with them by the end of this week or next week at the latest.
Is there anything other members can do to help that process along? So just be candid, like, can we get those emails out this week?
I think so. Absolutely. I
Yeah,
also think that, go ahead, Kevin, sorry.
Sorry, I think the only thing that we need to do right now is really draft up the emails. So if somebody would like to take the first stab at that, the email would detail the initial stuff of the idea of the bike ped advocacy group, and then we would attach the legislation and say that we would like to talk to an alder about it. So if members of this bike ped task force would like to begin drafting that, I would be more than happy to look it over and then send it off to the alders that we think would be sympathetic. I also would like other members of the bike ped task force to attend these meetings with me if possible.
I will stab the email and I would like to attend the meeting.
Wonderful. Thank you, Montavious.
Okay. And just right off the bat, Kevin and I talked about, like he said, about a few people in mind. Obviously, Kovac came to mind. Dmitrievich came to mind. But if anyone has any suggestions now about who they would want to send that to, I think, if like a few people would probably be good. I don't think that this is a very controversial thing. And I know, I definitely think it needs to be expedited. Montavious, per, your frustration last time we were together. So if you have any ideas, just put them out there now, and then we'll have a good list and move on.
Alderman Johnson would be at the top of my list.
Okay. Anyone else have any ideas? Or opposed to Kovac or Dmitrievich? We kind of just thought about people who are communicative, excited about these things as of late. Okay.
Those would be my top 3 choices.
Okay, thank you. Anything else before we move on to officers? Okay, let's do it.
All right, so I do have a Mentimeter set up, and currently it has everybody's names. So I guess the next step is call for nominations. So if anyone would like to nominate themselves or another for chair, we can do one at a time.
I nominate Caressa to be chair.
I'll nominate Montavious for chair if he's willing.
He is not. Do not vote for me, people.
I'll second for Caressa.
And I think I don't know if the nomination needs a second, so I think we'll go for it though. Yeah. Do you want a second? Any others?
Just James, quickly, did we solve this problem with the communication platform with Microsoft Teams. I see Brian had commented.
I guess I would ask Brian to maybe note in the chat or let us know, but it looks like Derek is moving a little more smoothly now.
Okay.
All right, well, just give me 1 minute. I will just update the poll here so that we have all set up. All right, the poll is open. So it's anonymous. So if you just vote for the person that you would like.
Wait, is there a link or am I supposed to grab the link from the email?
From the email, and I just sent
Okay.
it again, so it should be right
Okay.
in your inbox. All right, looks like all votes are in. Carissa, you are the chair.
All right.
Do I need to give a speech?
Yeah, your
Acknowledging
concession
my
speech.
loss. Yeah, concession speech. It was a
I'm
great
afraid of
race.
that.
You conducted yourself with great integrity and utmost honesty.
All right, thank you, everyone. Let's open up nominations for vice chair.
I vote for Kevin. Can I do that?
You can nominate him. You could also vote for him once he's been.
I nominate Kevin.
I would actually nominate Cynthia if she is willing.
Well, my answer key is not working. I would like to highlight, nominate.
I don't know if we caught that, Denitra. What did you? We didn't catch the name, I don't think.
Oh, Carissa. I'm sorry.
All right. I don't know if you can hold two offices, Carissa, but
That's okay.
Yeah.
I just appreciate you, Janitra. It's good to see
Yep.
you. Thank
all right.
you.
Give me 1 second again. I'll update unless there are any other nominations. All right, 1 second. All right, the poll should be open. Please feel free to vote. All right, all the votes are in. Cynthia, you are the new vice chair.
Cynthia, how do you feel?
Wait, I was like, my vote is not in yet. My vote
Wait,
is
what? Your
I
vote's
said
not
my
in
vote-
yet?
No.
You better get it in. You better get it in then.
I think we have 5 members.
Does that mean it looks like all votes are in? James, is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, I think all votes are in.
Does anyone want to change their vote? Cynthia, looking at you.
I was not expecting this, but
Well, just tell us how you feel. Do you want to maintain the role? Do you want to hand it over? You know, Montavis was very clear with us what he wanted, so I'm putting that out to you as well. Love to have you, but you're a busy gal.
yes, I mean, I was just getting warmed up into the role for the policy and programs.
Right.
Um, well, I would like to actually continue with the policy and programs lead. So does that mean Kevin stays the chair?
Vice
Should we
Chair?
just re-vote? Or,
Yeah.
I mean, I could change my vote because I voted for Cynthia, but I could change my vote, so
We should just, can we do that?
can I just change
That
my
would be
vote?
the appropriate thing to do.
Let me clear it out, and if you'd like to revote, sorry.
Well,
I mean,
if I
we could
could,
just,
I do think, and I would be more than happy to provide any support necessary. I do think, Cynthia, you would be great. I obviously don't want to speak for your time, but I think you and Caressa make a fantastic team. Not that I and Caressa do not, but I am also concerned about the amount of commitments that I have currently made. So it's not that I would not resume the responsibilities of the vice chair, but if somebody else would want to do that, I think Cynthia would be a very strong candidate.
I will reset the the slides for this one, and if it shakes out the same, then I think we know our answer. Okay.
Can we nominate still?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so I nominate Montavious for vice chair.
So all three nominations still.
I would accept this nomination.
All right, the votes are already coming in. All right, all the votes are in, and Montavious, you are the vice chair. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for entrusting me with this responsibility. I will try my hardest to bring us honor in the sight of the community.
excellent. Kevin, did you have your hand raised, or did you just take it?
It was by accident, but I would like to
Okay.
congratulate Montavious on his ascension to the new role.
Kevin's Montavious has already got this these emails under wrap for this legislation anyway, so good.
James
good
or Mike, do you guys know who I talked to get my new business cards?
I think it's Jim Ozarski.
Well, it's 5 o'clock now. A little bit past our time, just because we couldn't resist, telling James how much we're gonna miss him. So that's just too bad. We can stay on a little bit longer if you can, but we'll try to get through this as quickly as possible. Montavious, I'm really pleased to work with you as a leader, and I know that you will keep me accountable and expeditious. So looking forward to working with you. Okay, so if we're all good, I think we can move on to throwing out some goals for the 2022 season. I don't think that this is going to be the end of this conversation. I think it could be a great conversation to have in work group as well. Just because I'd like to give Cynthia some time to workshop some policy and project items. So I've asked Kevin, but Kevin's not the vice chair anymore, but maybe if it's okay, Kevin, since I've already talked to you about this, we could still be a scribe today for setting some of our goals for 2022. I would really appreciate it. Thank you.
The Jamboard is up. Would you like me to share it, or would
Sure.
you? Okay.
Okay, so I really didn't have like a set process for this. I think it's just I'd love for people to weigh in and on our 2022 goals. And I'm actually gonna, if you all don't mind, I'm going to put a goal on a sticky note first and just say that I'd like to complete our enabling legislation and finish our bylaws as soon as possible. If you want to, you can write out lickety quickety, but it might be a hard one to spell. And if anyone else is welcome to chime in.
I was actually going to put that down as well.
All right, well, that's done. I'm just kidding. Anyone else here on the member body have any goals that they'd like to see this group achieve in 2022?
I don't know how we want to word this, but I would like to see the Common Council pass a resolution for a pilot study for sidewalk and bike lane snow clearance.
I know for me, I think I would like to strengthen our relationships with DPW, Wisconsin DOT, and pretty much working groups, bike and pedestrian working groups throughout Milwaukee.
Is there a way we could, question for the whole group, is there a way we could put, what's that goal setting formula where it has to be timely and like an actual goal, like we met this at this point? What is that thing called?
Are you talking about like priority?
No, so goal, I think it's like STAR goals. Goal has to be, no, it's not STAR. Some acronym. But just in relation to Cynthia's goal and for all the other goals that are gonna come, like what would be the outcome of strengthening a relationship? Like we met with this many groups or this time where we had, like what would be the tangible outcome we check it off the box or check the box.
Okay, so it could be a date, it could be a number, like a unit number, a group number.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we
can do
discussing
that.
metrics or?
So that's actually what he's saying.
Okay, so set metrics to guide our goals.
Well, like under each, I'm assuming what Montavious means is under each sticky note, we can add something like within this time or by this time. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah. Smart goals. That's what it is. Smart goals.
So I would say for my goal, I'd like to see, obviously it's subject to council's meeting, but I'd like to see that wrap up before March.
What about the pilot study? Montavious, that was your goal. Do you have an idea for when you would like that to be completed?
September.
Yeah, I'm thinking for my goal. I don't know why, but I'm thinking an evaluation of like a quarterly evaluation almost. Um, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's not. Because I don't see this as a linear thing, but more so it may depend on, on projects and what we have on our end. So I don't know if anybody has recommendations for that metric.
Maybe this metric could be having these maybe a member of the task force presents what we have going on the task force to these groups, and that could be the specific measurable goal.
Okay.
I think that quarterly timeline is appropriate. I agree with your sentiment because we know that that's definitely a process. Does anyone else have any other goals? I also welcome anyone else who's joined us today to share any ideas that they have as well. Because we are liaisons between the public and the local government agencies. So, if there's something you really want to see,
Well,
shout out.
I'm Denitra, by the way. I'm not sure if you guys can hear me, but
Hey, Denitra.
what about more community engagement as to what's possible? I think we're missing like younger kind of presence, because they're the ones that we want to utilize, like the streets in a safe way.
Could I ask a clarifying question for that comment?
Yes.
When you say younger presence, you mean like both like how this body, works with others and also on the member body, like both and or?
I think both.
Okay. Yeah. And I would say too, just for all of those listening, the direction that this group can go in is with the amount of time that we have actually together is not a wealth of time, but I think, what this group could do is advise and communicate to a lot of the groups that we wish to strengthen partnerships with, to be constantly thinking and acting in the stead of youth and make sure that they're present, just like we should be constantly talking about persons with disabilities at the top of the list as opposed to always at the bottom kind of thing. That's the kind of work that we can say, hey Bike Fed, or hey Northwest Side CDC, like let's make sure we're in lockstep. I appreciate that comment, Anitra. Any assignments to it, or you want to come back to in terms of like metrics? Because I feel like that actually to me is very complementary to what Cynthia was saying as well, in terms of those relationship building goals. It's like subset youth. Anyone else?
This might be out of left field, but I think we should have a promotional video. A lot of times people don't know what's possible in the pedestrian and biking realm because, we don't have it here, so they don't know about it unless you traveled. So we could have a video that showcases all the possible stuff that other cities are doing. So that way people are exposed to it and then, start asking questions, how can I get involved in promoting this and advocating for this?
Is that something that you would like to see potentially happen by summer or also by September?
By September, because I was hoping to get video footage during the summer when people are actually out on bikes.
Gotcha.
And walking.
Sounds like a fun group outing. Maybe a study tour.
I could see the membership and bylaws being in this, as it would be the members that were doing this.
Brian Peters would like to ask a question.
Please. Go ahead, Brian.
All right, Brian, go ahead. Derek has to.
He froze for me for a second. Could you tell him to repeat himself, please? I'll just type in my question or my comment.
I see his question is, have we been asked to provide feedback on the scooter study?
This member body has not been asked to provide feedback on the scooter study. I will actually ask Mike or James if the scooter, I know a scooter survey has gone out to the public, if they've received or closed that survey and that report is available yet. Probably something Kate might know, but.
Yeah, I think that might be something to put on the agenda for next for the next meeting, because I unfortunately don't have all the details, but I believe the survey was going to be open through the rest of the year. And I think the report, there are parts of the report that are already being started just in terms of some of the data analysis. But yeah, if the task force would like to, I think, weigh in on the pilot study, the scooter pilot study, I think that would be something that DPW would be very interested in. So I think I would recommend a follow-up agenda item to get into it in more detail. And it probably would be relevant for the project and policy working group as well, if you wanted to have that before. Brian also said, just seems to me the scooter issue falls under this group, so I've been surprised that there has been no discussion in the meetings I've attended.
Thanks for the comment, Brian. Maybe perhaps you could rephrase that, or if someone wants to formulate that into a goal, because I do know that it was a shared goal amongst the member body to be involved in those discussions. I think that some of the stagnancy in developing a process for advising on things like scooters and projects has been the reason why you haven't seen that. We've transitioned into a new lead, and I'm hopeful that these items come up within the year. So perhaps, okay, yeah, Kevin's writing that out. I hope that kind of gets to your inquiry. So I agree, personally. I think other people do too, considering that something of interest. Okay, so it is 5:15. I want to do like a few more minutes of this goals for 2022, because I think we can also discuss this in small group as well. So please, if you have something burning, speak now. And you won't forever have to hold your peace, but I do want to give Cynthia some time.
Do we have a list of goals from 2021?
Yeah, let's see. As I mentioned before, in highlighting some of the progress, I put together a folder from the last time we all got together, and I asked you individually what are some things that you really want to work on. So you'd have to look through the individual slides. I think there might be a compilement as well to try to check out what we put in there. 1 second here, Montavious. Okay. So there's the Jamboard. Sorry, I was having some technical difficulties. Huh. Wonder. Okay, there we go. So I'm gonna open it up. And while I open up, if anyone has anything else, aside from, I do think it's important to look back at some of the things that were said from folks. But feel free to chime in if you want. Mine says it's validating URL. I don't know if other folks are having issues. Here we go. Snow and ice removal, obviously, huge. Like Brian said, big scooter participation. There's an individual concept of the Jefferson Street bike lane, but I would say people in general are very interested in improving connectivity for cycling and safer pedestrian ways within that level of service downtown. And just a fun fact, Milwaukee Walks Through the Bike Fed is focused on the downtown area this coming 2022, based off of crash data pulled from the community maps. Let's see. Yeah. Reviewing and advising on major projects. Tracking complete streets efficacy, Vision Zero. I should say Vision Zero was moderate to highly popular, but that's a big lift. That could be something that simply support through memos. Yeah. I don't know if that helps. I would say, after a conversation with Cynthia and getting ready for today, I'd say a goal would be to form a working and positive relationship with both, with major projects, I'd say. I think multimodal is very accessible. Major projects is less accessible, and I'd like to make that relationship better because those are big, important projects. And I'd like to see that happen even before the new year. Anything else from anyone before we move on? We're not done with this process. We can come back to it, but this is still a lot. Okay, we're gonna move on then. And thanks so much, Kevin, for doing that recording. We don't have a ton of time, but I'm just gonna kick us off into the next portion of this. The last, let's see, I'm just gonna double check the agenda. Okay, here we go. So the last time a small work group meeting for project and policies was scheduled, we had pretty low attendance. Cynthia and I met. We wanted to discuss a couple of things. One, how projects and policies advises on projects, connecting with local government agency, lawmakers and staff to articulate the urgency in improving our streetscape for the pedestrian experience, the cycling experience. And because we didn't have good attendance, we had a discussion about a letter that was sent to us by a constituent regarding a couple of major street projects. And we thought we may as well move this work group meeting into full member body meetings, since we weren't able to communicate with as many folks, and use these projects in this particular communication from the constituent as a way to exercise the potential in the way we advise on projects, and also how we may present our ideas to DPW to just advance and make these projects better, stronger, etc. So if some of you recall, the message that I did share with all of you was a question from a constituent regarding the Lisbon and Walnut reconstruction projects, and becoming more of a formal idea in creating a crosstown west-northwest arterial bike route if those two segments were joined. Now, those two segments are within about, I believe, like a 6-mile stretch. So it's a pretty considerable distance apart. However, I think it is great that individuals in the community are thinking about the connectivity levels and how this group may advance that conversation. The person says, hypothetically, these two projects can have a connector, be reconstructed over time in that connector with protected cycle track all the way through. So they just sent me, a little map of that here. If you can see it, as the green section is this Walnut project from 12th to, I think, 20th Street. And then, which this design has been finalized, actually. There's been 2 public involvement meetings for that. And then this particular section on West Lisbon Avenue is what is currently in the works. So I thought it was an interesting idea, well worth the discussion. And so I just circled back at some of those public involvement meetings, and I just wanted to share some things that came up with me in my head. I actually thought that the public involvement meeting, which was held in October, I thought it was fairly comprehensive. There were a few things that came up to me that maybe I felt could have been a little bit better, but the way I wanted to sort of categorize the concepts is something that I heard at one of the last Common Council Public Works meetings as to how DPW is going to be essentially prioritizing ARPA funding through a point system. And that was looking at prioritizing equity first and safety, and then there was feasibility. So I reviewed that public involvement meeting and sort of assessed that meeting based off of those particular point systems, and said, because in my mind I thought, why should we necessarily just focus on assessing ARPA projects in this way when we could assess all projects in this way? So I don't want to spend too much time on it. However, I do have a link for the West Walnut project if you do want to chime into the first public involvement meeting and just listen to it. What's exciting is that a large portion of the community really wants to see raised bike lanes and separated off the street, moving down to single lanes for the majority of that a little over half a mile stretch. And also, we're going to be seeing some raised crosswalks. So there's a lot of support around that. But there were some things like communication. I wrote down particularly like vocabulary, how you're articulating your ideas to the public. People who are not necessarily planners or engineers may not know all the things that you're talking about. Things like visualizations. Some people said it was hard to kind of visualize what the engineer was discussing. So there was at least one 3D rendering that I felt was really comprehensive. Also interpretive services. With the recording, I didn't see closed captioning available for ESL or American Sign Language or persons who are hard of hearing and deaf persons. Little things like that I felt like could be a part of essentially an evaluation of a project, or even as hopefully our relationships grow, we might be able to assess these projects before they even hit public involvement. So I'm just going to stop there, and because I wanted to talk about Walnut Project, and I was going to hand it over to Cynthia to spend the rest of our time talking about how she interpreted the West Lisbon project, and also workshop some ideas together about how we may be able to evaluate these projects and advise on them so that they're more comprehensive. The last thing I will say I wish was a part of this proposal is I do feel like a lot of needs were addressed from the perspective of a cyclist, from the perspective of a pedestrian. However, I do really appreciate when project managers discuss the reason why they're making those decisions in a holistic way, meaning we are doing these things because we have these policies, such as a pedestrian plan or a complete streets policy, that are a part of our community's shared values towards safety. It's just another opportunity to introduce people to this really wonderful, these pieces of legislation, these policies that they can use in the future to leverage for change at any given time. So I would say that was something that I'd like to see in the future. So with that said, I'll hand it over to Cynthia. I do have to plug in my computer before it dies.
Thank you, Carissa. Thanks. Yes. So when I was looking at the West Lisbon Avenue projects, I kind of had to take a step back, as in how do we move forward at the policy and programs committee, and our role that we, as a group, are leading with the Bike and Pedestrian Task Force. So, so I listened to the recorded audio of the West Lisbon Avenue project, and when in a minute when I share my interpretation, I want us to, especially for those in the Bike and Pedestrian Task Force in the public, to have a couple things or questions in mind, as in how do we move forward with this group. Okay, so when I sit in the listening session, there was a lot of really good feedback from community members. In fact, the project itself, as Carissa explained it, is how do people feel about bike lanes, pedestrian crossings, from I believe from the West Burleigh all the way to 100th Street, which that's what the measurement of the project will be. And there was a lot of people who were very excited in support of bike lanes. There were some concerns on certain intersections, especially around 84th Street, some of the more busy intersections, and more in regards with the kids and some of the different schools and churches that are along those lanes. And there were a couple people who were not very happy about this project moving forward, but I can say that the majority were very supportive of this program, adding more aspects of pedestrian friendly and bike friendly items. So with this said, I started thinking on how do we as the policy and programs committee do we look at this? And my sort of my what I anticipated from listening into this meeting is, I think exactly what one of the Brian, I believe you mentioned, is like there's so many projects that are out there right now in happening throughout Milwaukee County, Milwaukee City, that it's almost hard to say how do we evaluate them all, right? And one of the main things that this group was essentially made to be was to revision of projects happening at major projects, and sort of what Carissa already explained in terms of keeping a scorecard, right? Can we maybe think of a scorecard that we can check out when we look at all of these different projects, and kind of keep an agenda of how do we go about revising these projects that can make a better or a more cohesive way of working together. And when I thought about that, I said, well, that definitely. But I think it goes even deeper than that, because for that to happen, we have to have a very, I would say, a strong relationship with those managing those projects, right? So DPW in this case, Wisconsin Transportation Department. I mean, these are some of the relationships that we need, as well as a community involvement. Not to say that the reason why we even discussed it was because it was a letter, and I don't remember the resident that sent this, Carissa, but I think all of this came out of residents really saying, hey, have you guys as a bike and pedestrian task force thought about looking into this? And I think that's exactly what our lead where our lead starts. So I want to kind of open up the floor to really, after what I said, if there's any clarifications that you need from me, please let me know. But what does the group of the policies and program look like, this is an open question to all of you tuning in right now, look like, right, for the remainder of this year, and then looking into 2022. So I just want to open up the floor for that. And
So thanks, Cynthia. If you want me to, I can actually start a Jamboard 2 for this activity. And if I could just quickly get some clarification, I think that I want to reemphasize that the reason why this group exists, this small work group exists, is because of the interests that rose to the top through the participation initially in revisioning this group. So it's policy and projects, and this one half that is projects. It's going to be, you're not going to be able to do everything, but we discussed who could be responsible for making sure that we're attending these critical meetings, and also if we were to just create a snapshot and make something, I guess, feasible for us to share with the public, maybe those individuals who didn't catch a meeting or might have a challenging time interpreting what an engineer or designer, engineer or planner might be talking about. How can we make it easier, more accessible to learn about these aspects of these projects, and also, like I said, that holistic vision, like are these projects honoring the shared values within our policies and plans? So if we have any thoughts or ideas on that, or if you think that that's maybe you think we need to go in a completely different direction, please let me know. Let us know.
So if I understand correctly, we're asking what direction does the policy work group go, right? Like what do we see the policy work group doing, right?
Right. And yes, and also I would like to add that, just sharing my experience with being in the or tuning into the West Lisbon Avenue project, as an example of what we could do as a group, right? Do we want to, tune in into these major projects to really get a better grasp and understanding of things, or maybe not, or if we need to clarify some things, being able to have a relationship, right, with these projects that seem to be very important, but sometimes it feels like there might be a lot of overlapping projects that may not necessarily connect with each other, and can we be that glue to connect in a way all of those projects, keeping in mind the public opinion, as well as what this group can do together to support, support the essentially the what the public wants to see, or what have you. I mean, it could be that essentially, we're acting as a revising group that says, okay, we looking at safety, this is what this project has in safety, right? And essentially, we're given this information, to as a recommendation, essentially, for for these groups that can have an essentially like a better understanding of what is happening. Because I think sometimes one of the major issues or the major things that I saw happening in these meetings is that only the people involved may know, but maybe those neighboring folks, right, living maybe just a street away from where everything is happening, may not completely be aware. So as a group altogether, we are essentially creating like a bigger understanding, or a bigger pool of information for the community at large.
Sure. I do really like the idea of community outreach, and I think there's a lot of possibilities that that work group can go and do. I do also want to, I guess, reiterate the idea that Montavious had last year about the policy work group. I guess brainstorming or forging ideas and working on one particular idea. The goal last year had been to come up with a snow removal policy using different data, etc. So I think that's something that the policy work group should be doing. I think that was one of the goals that came out from last year, workshopping ideas. But I do think that there should be something that connects us to the public so that they can provide their insight and their unique experiences, and we can provide our expertise as well. But I think one of the things that we stress as one of the strengths of the Bike Ped Task Force is our I guess, connection to the community. So doing activities like that, I do think are incredibly important.
This is Montavia speaking. So I hear the desire to have better community outreach and make sure the community is involved and understand what's going on, especially in their immediate areas. A lot of times there's, all this engineering planner jargon. And I understand the want and desire to help them better understand, but I feel like DPW already is a what I think is a great job of that community outreach. So the example that you were using, Cynthia, of people on Walnut might get postcards in the mail about stuff that's going to happen on Walnut, but not 2 blocks away. I don't see our role as project and policy to be that bridge between that, but that might be a policy you want to come up with at DPW. Say, instead of doing a half a mile outreach for a new project, you do a mile outreach, because they have the staff and money to do that. We don't have the staff to do that kind of outreach for all the projects that go on in the city, but there already is the apparatus. So if the concern is community members aren't getting information or they don't understand the information, then that's just, making the DPW processes better. We come up with what that might look like, and we're hearing stuff, we're not getting this information, we don't understand. We can present that to DPW saying, this is what we're hearing in the community. Can you guys do better at this or start implementing this? And that's something they can take on. But I don't think we have the capacity to do that kind of work. But what I do think we have the capacity for is just what Kevin just mentioned. I said last year was, we identify these 2-3 projects that we work on for this year. My concern is, we always get stuff, in this meeting, outside of this meeting, concerns from the community, which are really out of our control. We don't have the power to, do much about those concerns. That's usually a DPW or DCD thing. We can be advocates for those, but there's just so much that people want us to do, and I don't think we have the manpower to do it. So instead of taking each of those concerns, and addressing them directly, maybe we come up with, policy at DPW level, like what Carissa was saying. Why are we only doing this equity scorecard or this, project scorecard for these ARPA funds? Why don't we do it for these other projects too? So that could be something we advocate for. I think that's the kind of stuff that's in our wheelhouse.
I do agree with Montavious. I do think there is a possibility to do not necessarily community outreach, because I agree with Montavious. We may not have the manpower to do that. However, if we are becoming an advocacy group, then I think our membership would be a little bit more, but it wouldn't be enough that we would be able to go out and do the outreach that maybe other departments might need to be doing. However, there might be a possibility for another work group that we could create through the membership and bylaws that holds listening sessions for those areas. And then as the bike ped advocacy group or committee or whatever moves forward, we would be that voice for the community through that work group that would hold those listening sessions. I think that would be an intriguing idea. We wouldn't be doing the outreach, but we would be listening to what the community was saying.
I think that I like that idea. I also think that that's big work for a group that meets so little. But if I could just kind of try to recalibrate our thoughts a little bit and sort of like buckets of actions, because I do want to clarify that I think that the way Montavious had laid out grabbing a couple of things and working on them is still a really good idea. When you have the concept of policy and concept of projects, a project could be working on a policy. Just for clarification, I want to make sure we're all on the same page in saying, if, like, for example, major projects, they actually, we don't have a ton of major projects. Major projects they're big, they're multi-year. For example, Walnut it's going to happen in 2023, but this is started in 2020. So it is a kind of a slower moving beast, but it's also very critical. I use that as an example because, it's not like we're going after every single project, and it's not like we can go after every single project. However, we definitely, what I told Cynthia is, yes, we should still be working on ice and snow removal. That is a thing. That is definitely a thing that we need to work on, especially after we had the operations director here. And I think that we could have definitely worked out our communications. That letter that we sent, we definitely needed to kind of recalibrate that. That's one bucket, and it really is associated with actually the goal that Montavious put out for 2022. The second bucket is really, it is a scorecard. Like what I said is like, well, why would we be using a point system for ARPA when we should be using a point system for everything? And this probably will tie very well into the Complete Streets Handbook process that's happening right now. But if we have an ability to get into public involvement meetings, we might not be able to get into every single one. Let's say for major projects, we task ourselves with listening, but ahead of time, we create some criteria that are very similar to what the DPW has already laid out, but maybe be more specific about what does it mean to define equity in this fashion, or what is safety, and share that with our colleagues at DPW as advisors. We can't make these changes. We're not responsible for making them, but we're definitely have the ability to we have the ability to decide what are the important things to us as a member body that we might feel maybe some nuances that are missing from that project delivery that could only improve the project delivery into the future, particularly for major projects. Because I think, for example, Montavious, I do think that multimodal has taken a lot of great cues and listened really well to the community, to organizations like the Bike Fed, Safe and Healthy Streets, and saying, you've got to do better at community engagement. You've got to meet people where they are. You're going to get a lot more people if you're actually on the corridor when you're doing this work, and providing things like accessible services, things for children to do, etc., children and families. And it's worked out quite well. But there's some aspects of, I think, these projects, particularly major projects, that are improving. I think I sent you a link for this actually Walnut project page. I think that's actually, I give it a B. I think it's really good. But I think there are some little tweaks that we might be able to advise on and try to build that relationship with that group of people we don't really often hear from a lot, which I think is a lot of engineers. So there's those two buckets. Like, if we can work on those two things, it's like, and that will, like, when people send us messages like, hey, did you hear about, this Lisbon Avenue project and Walnut Avenue project? These are major projects. We can say, yeah, we'll try to get to that public involvement meeting. And in fact, we have kind of a way to score that particular project, and we could share with the DPW. And, we hope that it's a good relationship that, only gets better from us just taking the time to be present, listen, and make sure that, people are hearing what our community shared values are from those project managers. I don't know if that kind of helps sum up those like two categories that are a policy and a project. Essentially, both of them are projects that we're working on, but maybe I was just being too literal.
So Cynthia had her hand raised.
Yes, no, thank you, James. Yes, I think kind of going back a little bit on the outreach, I think I didn't mean that we essentially would be doing the outreach per se, but more so honoring community reaching us directly to us, letting us know about, the West Lisbon project, the Walnut Way, project, and really taking those up, and doing that scoring, right? Because I do agree that, yes, we do not have the most capacity to all this, but at the end of the day, what is our goal as not just as a group, but as a bike and pedestrian task force, right? We want to be able to have substance to recommend, recommend good practices, and recommend, what could be, done, and, in the best interest of, the community at large. When I think about what the power of this group is, I think it heavily relies on, what people from community are telling us loudly, and us having a process in place that can say, okay, actually, yeah, this project is a C, but could be a B plus, right? And really taking that to heart. And I think more so in the actual program and policy, having a structure to go through that, because I think at this time, we are kind of, we're kind of going with what's coming to us, but there's not necessarily a set structure to really make sure that we're meeting our goals, that we're meeting, we're doing our indicators. So so that's why I think for me it was, it's very important to be able, to connect, these two projects as examples of what we could do within our groups to best support major projects throughout the city. Obviously, that doesn't mean that that we'll be able to hit every single one, but at least it gives us an opportunity to get to all the projects that are, that are coming to us based on what the residents are letting us know they want the task force to do, right, and to support. So
Okay, so I think because we have 10 minutes left, there's a couple of things I want to get answers to. One, is this member body interested in making an inquiry to the Department of Public Works, particularly, well, I'll just say Department of Public Works broadly, to find out about any projects in between those two major projects where there might be some levels of connectivity, essentially just, getting the agency to consider these two, what seems like really cool projects. And then my second question is, how do you feel about, coming up with a system for evaluating projects in a way that's, I guess, more linear, and then I'll tack on including working on, of course, the snow and ice removal stuff, policy. Montavious, I don't know, you're probably going to say something different, but I see you had your hand raised.
Yeah, so I think we can achieve the goal that it sounds like we are really focused in on. I think those conversations are a little broader than this, but we kind of zeroed on this scorecard and evaluating these projects throughout the city. And one way we can do that, given our capacity, instead of saying we're gonna score all these projects, we could, as part of the project and policy, come up with the policy that DPW scores their own projects based on the criteria that we could recommend. It sounds like they've already started that with the ARPA fund, so they have a scorecard. So maybe the policy project come up, find a sponsor at Common Council that says, okay, instead of just using this for ARPA, use it for these projects that meet these criteria over $1 million or whatever it's going to be. So we achieved the goal of having projects scored. So when people come to us and say, hey, this Walnut project, what do you think about this? Oh, DPW scored it this way. Oh, this Lisbon project, oh, DPW scored it this way. So people still get those scores, but we didn't have to do that work. But we did support it getting scored because we helped come up with the policy that required it to be scored. So that's what I envision as the project and policy, because, we can't score all this. There's too much stuff in the city. It's what, 4 or 5 people on the project and policy, people with full-time jobs, it would be too much, and it'd be duplicating what DPW is already doing.
thank you. Yep, thank you, Montavious. I mean, yes, absolutely. I think that's why one of my goals is, can we get those, strengthen those relationships with our, with our friends at DPW, and I think, absolutely. I think that's I really appreciate your feedback on that, because essentially, yes, I mean, how do we work together if not, not by duplicating work for sure, right? But in a way that it makes sense, and so I really appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
So, okay, I appreciate that feedback, Montavious. It sounds like we're okay with moving forward with making adjustments or digging deeper into the snow and ice removal goal. I'm not going to touch that because I like that work group to also come up with a solution that's alternative to the last letter that was submitted, and just work that out a little bit. But I really like this idea that Montavious is running on, in terms of like the capacity of this group. So I would really like to see this work group definitely formulate a communication, whatever it is, in regards to this sort of scorecard concept, and really dig deeper in learning about what was the thinking or basis around that in relationship to ARPA, and getting that information from the DPW and working with them to make this more official, and also see if it's going to land in the Complete Streets Handbook. Because if that's the case, that's really great, but we're going to have to make sure that that handbook is actually implemented, because it's only as good as the person who, takes charge over implementing that particular set of metrics or, instruction. Is that something that we feel good about?
I really like the idea.
Okay, I do too.
My thumbs up.
Okay, great. Anyone else? Mitch?
Yeah, I like that idea as well, in terms of being kind of a force multiplier of how kind of the city that has the resources should be doing things.
Okay. Cynthia, lastly, because we only have a few minutes here, did you want to discuss meeting timelines with these folks so that we can get something on the books?
Yes, I know we have a few minutes left, but I would like to actually open it up to a couple, the feedback to a couple suggestions that I have. So I know initially we had arranged to meet every third Wednesday of the month for our programs and policy group for about an hour. But I think going this route, it may actually need a little bit more of a heavy lifting. So I'm also suggesting meeting bi-monthly for about 2 hours perhaps to get this work down. So any feedback on that, those in the programs and policy? Carissa, you're also part of it.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. Can you ask the question again? Can you rephrase the question?
So so I'm suggesting 2 meeting times at this point for policy and programs meeting. One is monthly, every third Wednesday of the month, or bi-monthly for 2 hours. No date or time down yet.
I think I could go either way, but I do like the idea of meeting bi-monthly and putting in more time, because I just feel like an hour goes by quite quickly. And I think to address those 2 items, I think it would be good to have a solid hour for each of them. And if we wrap up early, that's fine.
Thank you. Mitch?
Yeah, that makes sense to me too.
Okay. And I second my own thing. So, all right. So so I'll make sure to get out an email with a few times, and then just ask for date and times on you guys' behalf, or on you guys' end.
And I would just make a quick note, Cynthia, that Mike's gonna be our assistant in this process now, so make sure that you communicate that with him. And just as a reminder, I think so Montavious, or I don't know, Kevin, I don't know if you want to still be the work group lead for membership and bylaws. We can discuss that offline, but I really want us to commit to those dates and show up, because the public is also involved or invited to those. So we have to also work out a communication with Mike where the public is involved to these work group meetings, and then they're kept. So just as a reminder. And Kevin, I'd love to have you as a work group lead, but if Montavious wants to take that over, that's cool too.
We can discuss.
Since you're on the topic of scheduling meetings, technically part of the annual meeting is to establish the schedule for the next year for the full task force. So yeah, seeing as you're at time, if you want to coordinate that offline, I think that would be appropriate. But if there's consensus that you'd want to continue with the monthly at the times that they're currently scheduled, you could probably do that too.
How do we feel about that, folks? Should I pull it offline, or are you okay with this time? And
I'm okay with
monthly?
the time that we currently have.
Me
I'm
too.
okay with the time.
Me too.
Okay, I second that. If that's necessary. Thank you. Well, okay. If anyone else has anything to say, we are at time. Please let me know. Speak now. I really appreciate everyone's patience and commitment to 2021. And I hope that we get some stuff cranked out in 2022. So, James, again, we're gonna miss you.
James.
Come on, James. Oh, and I make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
Okay. All right. Bye, everyone. Have a good night.
See you, James. Thank you, brother.
All right.
Yeah,
Bye,
it's been a
James.
pleasure.
Bye forever. Bye.
What?
Thank-
Not forever.